And this show's all
Okay,
yours.
my spot just got a little noisy. I'm just gonna move as I begin to start. So welcome to the, what is today? September 23rd, 2021 meeting of the Quality of Life Committee for Community Board 1. I am Mariama, the co-chair of this committee. We'll soon be joined by Pat Moore, the chair. I can't see the first item on the agenda yet. Let's see.
Mariam, if it helps, I can read it out to you. I have it big on my screen.
Okay, great. Affordable housing basics presentation and discussion. So how might we start that?
So what we're going to do, we're going to be joined by a urban planner from an organization called ANHD. They're a widely respected citywide not-for-profit that really does a lot of great work in kind of comprehensive city planning, and they tackle all sorts of issues from housing to supporting businesses. And I've had the good fortune of overlapping with them many times throughout my career in New York City, and I've always been just really impressed. So I wanted to make sure that there was a non-city voice to come in and talk about some of the discussion points around affordable housing, especially as they relate to 5 World Trade Center. So you have a much more unbiased opinion and not anything that's painted in a certain light by people who may be affiliated with the project. So it's your opportunity to get the straight dope on a lot of these things, if you will. But I wanted to start with a little basic overview of a couple different concepts and terms. That way, when this planner, Christopher, comes and signs on, you can focus on just getting down into the nitty gritty of things.
That sounds great. Thank you so
Yeah.
much for inviting this organization. And we may also want to check in with Jill as the chair of the subcommittee for affordable housing to see if she wants to say anything too.
I'm here. Thank you.
Jill, great to see you. Just a couple other things that I want to preview on the agenda. We're going to talk about the capital and expense budget items for fiscal year 2023. This is a super important conversation around what the city should spend its money on in the next fiscal year, and also how to look at what we asked for the current fiscal year and whether or not it was allotted to, or they listened to that request, or what the reason was for rejection. And then you'll see the last item says World Trade Center Site 5 project update by ESD. We originally asked for them to come to this committee meeting, and then they said it didn't fit their calendar, but they could make the executive committee meeting on the 29th. So today is very much a prep session for the 29th. This is so we can get right to the heart of the matter with them and ask the hardest hitting questions you can based on all the things that we hear today from ANHD. One other item that I think I would say this is definitely on me. We might also want to talk about the questions for equity and inclusion, which is certainly something that is really an important item that exec committee will be talking about for this month and next month. And that's how to make sure that any topic that this committee considers, if a resolution is generated out of this committee, how does that resolution jive with the really important concepts of equity and inclusion? So that's something to keep in mind. And with that, let me just talk a little bit about a term that you're going to hear left and right as we talk about this conversation, and that's AMI. I have a really good chart here. Can everyone see this chart?
Yeah, yes, thank you.
Yeah, good. So this chart shows a really interesting kind of phenomena, but reality for metropolitan areas in the United States. The basic measure of what is considered to be the median income for an area is defined by the federal government, by Housing and Urban Development, which is a cabinet level position in the executive branch of the federal government. And they decide how we calculate AMI by telling us which counties of the state to include when we're looking at all the different incomes. So just as a refresher, the median looks at if you have a huge list of numbers and you order them sequentially from the lowest to the highest. The median is the value that's right in the middle, not in the top 50 percentile, not in the bottom 50 percentile, but right in the middle. And that's important because an average, especially in an area like New York City, an average would not be a very useful number, mainly because the presence of several billionaires would be enough to pull the average far off from giving you a good snapshot of what you would otherwise think would be the average. So in the city of New York, or the New York area as defined by HUD, we include 3 counties, and this is often a point of contention with a lot of affordable housing advocates, and that the 3 counties that are included in our AMI calculation are generally very wealthy counties. You can compare the median income, the median household income for Westchester, Putnam, and Rockland with, say, the Bronx. So Putnam County, the median income is 90,000, and the Bronx is 35,000. Quite a difference. Now, I'll talk a little bit about how the city can correct for that, but it is a debate that is worth knowing about. So AMI is out of the hands of New York City. New York City takes the AMI that's given to them by HUD after HUD does its analysis, and then looks to set up we call it AMI chart. So I'm going to pull that up. This is something you're going to see over and over and over again in this conversation. So it's best that you, here it is, let's share Safari. So this is the Housing Preservation Development website, where they talk directly about AMI. And here's the AMI chart, the 2021 New York City AMI chart. They actually will hand out little paper palm cards when you do like charrettes with HPD, because you're always referring to this chart. When you see the income bands, which are represented on this chart, this is their way, and I don't know if you can see my mouse, but along the top, the headers for all the columns, you'll see the percentage of AMI. So at 100% AMI, this is the value that was given to New York City by the federal government, by HUD. So for a family size of 1 person, 100% is 83,600 people. Now, the graphic I showed you earlier is from 2015, so it's wildly out of date, but the map, the geography is current. But the present value for 100% of AMI is 83,000. So if you take a family of 4 at 100% AMI, so 1, 2, 3, 4, it's 119,000 between 2 people. So this is a really important concept, because this matrix shows that the larger the family, the more income they can make to fit within each percentile of AMI. Does anyone have any questions?
Hi, Jill here.
Hi, Jill.
Just to kind of deconfuse me, if that's a word.
Sure.
So it's important to understand AMI, and AMI is absolutely an integral part of figuring out affordable housing. However, my understanding is the purpose of this discussion is going to be specific to 5 World Trade Center, where AMI at a certain point will come into it, but 5 World Trade Center has very unique issues, and this seems more like a very general affordability issue. Am I correct in my understanding?
This discussion is a precursor to a much more in-depth discussion that will happen when the ANHD planner signs on.
Okay.
I want to make sure that everyone has these terms kind of locked down solid, because they are going to be fundamentally, when the project partner team for 5 World Trade Center between Silverstein, ESD, and the Port Authority present their case of what, the makeup of the building, whether it's the share of units that are set aside to be income restricted, and then of those units, how many of each unit is set to a certain percentage of AMI.
Okay.
And
Is
this is
this,
important because
yeah,
what I want to show you is, I also want to kind of discuss the financial district and the income distribution of the financial district, just so everyone is based in, what does it look like now? How does that relate? Does the community board want this to serve a local population? Does it want to serve a much, broader population to diversify the income? And those are the sorts of things that people are going to have to, decide. And by looking at AMI, that's how you'll know what portion the units are serving those different income bands, and then overall, what percentage of the building overall is restricted income.
I'm
So
gonna,
I have a question too. I'm sorry, Jill, go ahead.
no, it may be the same question, because Five World Trade Center, we're really looking at this specifically as mixed income for various levels of income, but the most specific issue here is really for 9/11 related survivors. This is 9/11 related money, and none of what you're mentioning seems to touch on that. But I defer to Mariama for her question.
My question, and I appreciate the education. My question is, we experience, well, first a comment, we experience the problems that you described on a more local level with, for example, Chinatown, where maybe there are small businesses, that are a storefront to a tenement building, and you maybe have a large family with not that great of an income there, but they fall into 10013 in Tribeca or 10038 in FIDI. And of course, we know that part of Chinatown is part of Community Board 1. And some people in other parts of the city might say, oh, Community Board 1 is wealthy. And that's not necessarily the case. So we're experiencing these, we're talking about maybe asking questions about diversity and inclusion, but it seems like it's written into the law here. And I guess my question was, bad enough that we're having to include Westchester and everything, but we've got our own problems locally. Is there a path to maybe a resolution or something asking that these numbers be sort of recalibrated and recalculated to where they are more realistic? Because what's happening is middle income people are being locked out all over the place. A new affordable housing tower, well, I'll put in air quotes or quotes, affordable housing tower came to Lower Manhattan recently, and in the paper, as part of the lottery, they were describing things like salaries as low or high, depending upon one's perspective, of $45,000 a year, with a rent as much as $3,000. That's nonsensical. So, is there a path, in your opinion, I guess, for us to ask that this be changed, corrected?
So Congress people have written HUD and asked them to reformulate the calculation, and they haven't done so. So, do I think that it's likely that they're going to change it? No, I don't think they will. What I think that others have suggested, and what I'm going to recommend to the board, is I'm hearing two kind of different paths. They're not mutually exclusive, but they're two different things I've heard just between the two different questioners. One is set asides for a certain group, and I've heard middle income, protecting middle income housing for the district. Those are two things that are not out of the realm of possibilities. I don't know what it would take to create the carve out specifically for survivors of 9/11, but I do know that there are groups that have set asides in affordable housing buildings that are generated and adhere to zoning. For example, municipal employees, there's typically like, a couple percentage of units, like 5% of units would go to municipal employees. A certain percentage of the units is set aside for those with disabilities. And so when they go through the housing lottery process, when someone says like, oh, I have this disability, they're more likely to hit a unit because they're a smaller population of the whole, and there's a set aside for them in that regard. So could there be a special set aside for those who survived 9/11? Well, I mean, this sort of thing exists in the system. Whether it would take legislation or something else, or federal approval to include it in the lottery system, that remains to be seen. So Jill, that's one
It
thing.
sounds
So
like based on what you just said, theoretically, first responders are municipal employees,
that's right. That's right. That's right.
theoretically, 9/11 survivors are people with disabilities.
Yeah, yeah. If you have a 9/11 related issue and it qualifies as a disability, and I'd have to look at the definition, but yeah, certainly that would, that would be part of that set aside. So here's the other side. What's middle income? So, middle income is a number that you all have to kind of each individually or collectively decide what that means to you. And looking at this chart, you can see that absolutely the lower ends of incomes are represented in CB1. This is data that's put together by the Furman Center. This is a trusted name in affordable housing analysis reports, data collection. There's certainly a large percentage of the district that falls under $100,000 a year. There's certainly the two sections here on the rightmost part of the chart are likely much higher than almost any other district of the 59, save a couple other choice ones in Manhattan. But it's not without low to middle income in the district. So I don't think anyone's going to argue that those income profiles don't exist. You can see that from the 2000 census in green to the 2015-2019 American Community Survey, the share of the lower incomes has gone down. So I mean, you could definitely make the argument that statistically and numerically there is a decline in people who are not wealthy in the district over the last 15 to 20 years. So that's what this is showing here. Getting back to the AMI, you'd have to choose on this chart, what AMI percentage represents middle income. So if you say two people with a combined salary, say, and two children, what is that number? And you find the number on this chart, and that's kind of your AMI target. And I want you all to kind of think about that, maybe not tonight, but think about that before the next conversation with 5 World Trade Center, because that's the depth of affordability will ultimately affect the proportion of units overall that can be income restricted. If you assume that you have a finite amount of subsidy, now we'd love to find more subsidy and maybe have other sources of money come in to push these units down or have more units. But if you say I have $20 million in subsidy, just as a number I'm pulling out of thin air, you can either have more units be income restricted at a higher percentage, somewhere up higher, or you can have deeper affordability, but the share is lower. And that's typically the way the pendulum swings in these projects. There's some council members, when they're talking with city planning or developers, they'll say, I really need to have these lower levels here, and including levels that are below 30%, which are supportive housing. And other districts will say, we want to make sure that there's workforce housing that's going to cover these upper limits, because these people are also getting boxed out. And this is an income level that we want to prioritize. So that's the reason why I'm kind of going over this, because they're going to show you actually, let me just pull up their presentation that they gave at the executive committee.
Lucian, are people able to combine, several of these? Because like, to Jill's point, the community and therefore the coalition seek to provide like a varying degrees of affordability from like deeply affordable.
Yeah, you can mix and match. You can mix and match. So for example, what they presented in August is 300 plus affordable units. This number is a little vague, so more than 300, but probably under 400 affordable units ranging from 30 to 80% AMI. So, going back to the chart, what does that mean? 30 to 80% of AMI. So a family of four could either, two combined incomes go from 35,000 to, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4 to 95,000. So, that's like two people making, $42,000 a year, or one person making $95,000 a year with three other people in the household, for example.
So
That's what that
Lucian,
means here.
are
Yeah.
we really just talking about how we want EDS, et cetera, to divide up the already committed units, but not talking about increasing the overall number of units?
No, I'm not saying that you should hold back. I think you should say everything you want, but I want you to understand kind of the mechanics of this system, because they're going to be speaking through this chart and
Okay.
these units, and I just want you all to have apples to apples and what it is that you're asking for, because if you want to say, well, we want 100% of the units to be income restricted, and we want to income restricted to a certain percentage of AMI, they'll do a back of the envelope a calculation, and they'll kind of know how much subsidy is required for a building of that size, the number of units, and then of course not, if they have market rate units, they'd have to reconfigure them, because market rate units probably, if you have like a extravagant large apartment, that's to keep things equitable. You'd want to have a floor plan that everyone has a similar floor plan, right?
Right.
So it would affect the number of units ultimately in the building. These are all kind of as part of their pro forma to see how the project pencils out and be profitable, right? Because this is a private developer that's involved. They're going to seek to make a profit. You're essentially kind of matching what subsidy is available, how much cross subsidy are they going to have from the market rate units. If there's no market rate units, then where do the extra monies come from to kind of achieve the goals of ESD and the Port Authority? And that's the recipe that you all are going to be working in, and they'll push back on certain things, but it'll be just important for you all to know what your priorities are, because this system is the one that they'll be using to talk about it. So I want you to just go back to this
Thank you for
chart
that
again.
explanation. No,
Yeah,
thank you.
certainly.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the only, that was the only kind of mention for the affordability is here. And so just to kind of go in a little bit until Christopher signs in. Oh, there he is. What they're saying here is that, CB1 has a very low production of affordable units, of income restricted units. And that's partially because your district is pretty much built out. It would take a pretty radical upzoning, and that's a conversation for another day, to create a lot more opportunities for affordable housing. But from 2018, 61 units were created.
Right, it's also because of the number of affordable units that exited.
Oh, and so that's a preservation question, but I'm gonna bring Chris up onto the dais here, introduce him to you all. I'll just say Chris is just really.
I'm here now. Hi.
And Pat. Oh, hi Pat. How are you?
I'm here. Hi,
For all
everybody.
the guests, Pat is our chair. Pat, I just did a little bit of a affordable housing overview.
Thank you, both you and Mariama. Thank you. You and I will catch up on this, and I'll also look at the recording. Sorry I'm late, everyone.
Of course.
So yes, Chris is from ANHD. He's a planner with ANHD, and I really just appreciate, he's going to give us about an hour of his time. So I'm just going to have him say what his preferred way to kick off this conversation. It's not a presentation. We're going to have a conversation. Christopher?
That's great. Thanks. And Chris is great. And evening all. Thanks for having me on. My name is Chris Walters. I'm the Land Use Policy Coordinator at ANHD, which stands for the Association for Neighborhood and Housing Development. So we're a member group. We have about 80 members. We are affordable housing and equitable economic development advocates. So our members, in some cases, build and run affordable housing. In many cases, are grassroots groups that are fighting to build community power for more affordable housing in their neighborhoods throughout the city. And yeah, I think here tonight just to help answer what questions I can about affordable housing in general, to the extent I can get specific on 5 World Trade Center. I'm happy to try sort of getting up to speed a bit on the project. And I think it was Lucian who was speaking. We haven't met, just emailed, but yeah, I didn't come in with a presentation, but just here to sort of hear from you all. So I think whatever you all think is the best way to get started, that works for me.
Were you able to hear any of the questions that we asked thus far, or should we start fresh with you?
I apologize. I just came on. I'm
Okay,
home with
that's
my
fine.
kids, and I had to just parse out my time. So I'm sorry.
That's fine. I just didn't want to bore you with the same questions again. Jill, you want to go?
Sure, kind of in a nutshell. So 5 World Trade Center, it's the last site that's up for development. There have been billions and billions, literally, of subsidies given to developers for the World Trade Center site and throughout Lower Manhattan. This were 9/11 federal dollars. So Silverstein, who's a huge developer, looks like it's going to be awarded. His RFP was accepted to build an 80-story luxury housing tower on this last site. FYI, there are bankrupt towers and empty towers surrounding this site. In addition, you may have heard that over the course of 20 years, we've had how many 60 units of affordable housing built? Some ridiculously low number. So this 80-story, 900-foot building, they have agreed to do 30% MIH housing. We as a community in the neighborhood want this building to be 100% affordable, mixed income, various, the whole range of affordable incomes, representing in part the people in this neighborhood who can no longer afford to live here, the first responders who, their families, people who've given their lives, people who are sick, as well as a cross-section from the general population of New York. It's important to note that this site and this money was given specifically for the purposes of to benefit downtown Manhattan. It's state funded, it's state money, so it's unique in that sense. So that's kind of brings us up to where we stand. 100 units or 300 units of MIH is great. It's wonderful. We're happy they agreed to that, but that really isn't what this building, in our opinion, should be about.
And can I ask, was the land, like, it is publicly owned land, or it was land that the state
Yes.
took through eminent domain, right, through their project? Yeah.
It was very complicated, and they're going to make your eyes glaze over with undecipherable details about how this was public, it was owned by Deutsche Bank, but somehow the LMDC, that was our federal 9/11 money, purchased this, but then the Port Authority gave some property to the memorial and to the arts structure. And so somehow in exchange, even though they're a public company, they need to be made whole. And the way they're going to be made whole is by having Silverstein build an 80-story luxury building. we disagree with this analysis,
Right,
but that's
right.
it in a nutshell. Anyone jump in if I got that wrong.
No, you got that right.
Yeah, and I think that's obviously that's where the community's leverage lies, is in the fact that that this is that this is public land, and exactly as you've said, that there are, well, almost really just as simple as that. I think in general, affordable housing is a question of political will, and every fight is just a matter of um, what your leverage is. When it is private land, that's where something like a MIH, especially in a district like yours where there's not a lot of opportunity for upzonings, MIH is a good tool to extract affordable housing where you're not getting it otherwise. But exactly, this is one where that's really not the case, where it is a government decision as to what goes on this site. They are partnering with private actors. And even in them sort of saying that MIH, they're not really following MIH, because if I understand correctly, they're not bound by the city's zoning resolution. And someone let me know if that's wrong. But just looking at, I think the deck that Lucian sent over, MIH is a tool that works because it's written into the city's zoning resolution. And so you have to follow zoning. And that means if you're a large enough development where MIH has been mapped, you have to follow MIH. MIH has not been mapped, I don't believe will be mapped. And it's sort of moot because, the Port Authority and others are saying, we don't have to follow the city's zoning resolution. So
I'm a little confused. I mean, when talking about, this area is, that piece of land is zoned for very, very tall buildings. Is that what you mean?
the land is zoned for very tall, right? I think it's it's about the highest commercial
Right.
zoning,
Zoning.
which allows residential. But what I'm saying is that the city actually has they have been very careful in only applying MIH where they are upzoning a property, so where they are increasing the allowable density, which is not happening here.
Ah,
And even taking a step back, and again, this might be the same deck that you're all looking at here. I noted it from ESD that they are not bound by the city's zoning resolution. So it actually looks to me like they're building a bigger building even than the very high zoning designation would allow. That might be because they're transferring some of, that they're combining it with St. Nicholas and with the, Liberty Park.
I'm sure
But I
they're
think the
doing
more
that.
relevant point is that they're actually, they're saying they're following the MIH framework. They are not following MIH
That's
because
correct.
they're not bound by the city zoning resolution. So that also means they're not bound. They can go beyond MIH. They're choosing to say, we're going to provide affordable and we're going to follow the MIH framework, which is typically 25% at an average of 60% AMI, or 30% at an average of 80% AMI. Sounds like they're doing a little bit better here if they're trying to average 50%. Again, tell me if this stuff has changed, but if they're saying 25 to 30% affordable at an average of 50% AMI. But again, the main point I'm just trying to make right now is that it is actually not technically an MIH project. There's nothing in the zoning that's requiring it. They're choosing how much affordable to provide, and they're just pegging it to the MIH framework, more or less.
Yeah, Chris, this is actually being, the conveyance is a general project plan modification, that there was a GPP that existed for the original kind of commercial tower. And so they're altering the GPP to permit a residential tower to go there instead. And yes, as you said, they're applying MIH
Right.
equivalent, but I don't know enough about what sort of deed restrictions or anything like that will be associated with that being a state project.
Yeah. And, I guess most broadly, it will be my understanding with that general plan that then there's latitude to exactly, they're changing it from all commercial to mixed use residential, and they're deciding what level of affordability will be included there. There's nothing that should be, there's nothing that I would be aware of that will be dictating what that has to be.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything compelling them to.
Right, exactly.
Well, I mean, I'm assuming that they are dictating because they're determining how much income they have to make off of the building to run the building. Is that not correct?
They're determining, yes, that is correct, but I think a few things that strike me in this situation, again, if it's public land, then part of that cost is based on the lease that would be going to Silverstein, right? It's the state that's deciding, because I believe, right, the idea is that it'll be something like a 99-year ground lease, right? The state is going to keep ownership of the land, of the ground.
I don't know.
I'm
has
not
anybody-
sure. I'm not
I don't
sure
know
about that. I know it's a sale, but I don't know if it includes the ground or not.
That would be something to get clarity on. I think either way, I guess what I'm trying to say is that the state is an actor in the sale or lease of that property, which is
100%.
something that's going to affect Silverstein's bottom line, which is going to affect their assessment of how much affordable can be provided for them to be able to run the building, and obviously more than just run the building, but make whatever profit it is that they're trying to
Well,
make off the building. So
they're also
The state is essentially
dangling.
the actor because they're LMDC, they're ESD,
right.
and they're Port Authority.
Right.
Chris,
Yeah,
They're
exactly. So
dangling
this is not
carrots.
something where they can say, exactly. This is not something where Silverstein says, well, we already paid, 20 million for this, so we've got to recoup. Exactly. And I'm sorry, Pat, you were saying
Well,
something.
not only did he not pay 20 million, but he's also supposedly they're exchanging property from the World Trade Center proper, where the
Right,
memorial
right.
is. So in essence, he already owned that or had the lease on that. And now if they're just exchanging it, then it's supposed to be an equitable exchange. There shouldn't be any, you know what I mean? There shouldn't, yeah. But also they're dangling carrots in front of us too with, this community center that they're going to offer.
Mhm.
So I'm sure they would also say, well, it's going to cost X amount of money to run the community center.
yeah,
So,
well, I think the community center is going to be an Equinox from what I take away, but that's a whole, they
I
call
hope not, because I'm very much fighting against that.
yeah, community amenity is a term of art I've learned.
Yeah.
So
Yes.
here's the question. With all the subsidies that we're not being told about that we believe Silverstein and his partners in this Brookfield are getting to do this, does that give us any additional leverage? Because we know they're getting benefits to do this, government benefits, and what does that give us, if anything?
Yeah, no, I think the same. I think that, exactly, generally the way that you get affordable housing is either through government subsidy, and that's the more common way, or it's through zoning mandates, either mandatory, which is a newer program, or voluntary, which started or was really sort of expanded under Bloomberg, and which gives more density for setting aside a portion of affordable. But subsidy is how you get affordable, is generally how most developments get affordable housing, how you get 100% affordable housing. So one, right, it can be very hard to get transparency from developers, especially, not mission driven, from profit, for-profit developers, as to all the subsidy they're taking, if they're doing low-income tax credits, if they're, doing 421A, tax abatement, 30-year tax abatements. So I think, trying to, to make clear that you want to know all the subsidy that is going into it. And then again, just like this, that the state is the actor in the sale of land, than saying we need to, then what more subsidy is needed to reach a higher level, ideally, 100% affordable.
Exactly. Because if we know what the subsidy is he's getting now, that kind of lowers the threshold a little bit, right, for us in terms of what we have to say we have to raise, so to speak.
Yes, yep. And it's always tricky because in these negotiations, exactly as you were saying, the public benefit is what's given and what's dangled to the community, and that is very much public. The other side of that equation, what the developer is getting and giving up by providing public is generally not, that's not transparent. And so you don't see the full ledger, you don't see both sides of the equation.
Can I ask a question?
Jump in, Bob.
I was working with Tom Goodkind on an earlier housing committee, and one of his interests over a long time was West Bath, which I'm sure you know of, and he was very interested in artist housing, and now World Trade Center 5 is going to be within maybe 800 yards away from a major national artist performing arts center. So there's a natural kind of synergy and relationship for that. So is there any such thing as making a pitch for a specialty housing use within this new center, especially since there is that relationship with the new art center? And really, there's always been a pitch made for Lower Manhattan having a real artistic interest, and so this would be a way to actually kind of found that interest and give it more of a presence. So is it possible to make that kind of pitch in this case? And
Yeah.
how do we do that?
Yeah.
How do we package it?
Yeah, it should be, and the city has a good amount of precedent with setting aside preferences. The largest of those has typically been community board, community district preference, which that has been challenged by a lawsuit that was brought a number of years ago. It's actually my understanding now that the city is no longer setting aside that preference, but they've also have generally done a preference for municipal employees, often about 5% of the affordable units. They've done a preference for individuals with disabilities, and then in some individual cases they will do. I think a very relevant one is Essex Crossing on the Lower East Side, just below the Williamsburg Bridge, which was vacant for decades. It was urban renewal, and when they finally started building something there, they offered a preference to households that have been displaced or their descendants that have been displaced as part of that urban renewal. And that was something, I'm not going to get the percentage right, but there was definitely a set aside for folks. So I think that's relevant both for artists and, I was hearing someone earlier saying for families of first responders or, folks who were, I'm not sure if you were saying folks who were displaced on with the attacks on 9/11.
The 9/11 survivors.
Or 9/11 survivors, I'm sorry, thank you, yep.
Especially 9/11 survivors who've been displaced by the high rents that have come in here. Right.
Well,
yeah, we're seeking for 9/11 survivors, first responders, and the children of both of those classes, as well as seniors, many of which are, qualify under the survivors classification already.
Well, and survivors means, people who were living in the community, obviously, but their children, and I'm sure this may have been said earlier, I'm sorry I was late, but that their children can no longer afford, once they become of age, they can no longer afford to live in the community that they grew up in. And I asked at one of those meetings that people who live in the community get preferential treatment. And I was told, Rosa, were you at this meeting when I asked that question? and they were told that, I was told that there was some lawsuit that had been brought against another community that asked for that, and that was no longer applicable. I don't, can you explain that to us?
Yeah, Essex Street sounds like a kind of an answer to that in a way. So I'm very, very curious because, for instance, the building I live in with many, many neighbors who have 9/11 cancers, whose family members have passed away. We're the closest building except for Pat and a few others. We were all basically on the site. Our buildings were on the site, in effect. And our rents are now being raised beyond the point where we can afford them as a result of all this money pouring in through Liberty bonds, et cetera. So if there's an analogy to Essex Street, I'm very interested in hearing it.
Yeah, I think
Pat, to answer your question, I was not. So I'm thinking that meeting must have happened before I got on board.
Okay. Yeah, so I would like to know if you know about this lawsuit and why.
Yeah, that would be what I was referencing with the community preference. So it was HPD's policy that for the affordable housing lottery, 50% of units would go to residents of the community district. So affordable housing in CB1, there's going to be a preference for 50% of them are set aside for residents of Community District 1. And there was a lawsuit that was brought, I think, in 2017, but it's still going through the courts, that claimed that enshrines segregation, that makes it so that a whiter community district, it's harder for households of color to get affordable housing in those communities when 50% is going to current residents. And so I don't know the current status of that, but that is what HPD is referring to, and that's why it's my belief my understanding that they no longer do that community district preference. But then
what if there was a caveat where, because survivors actually includes people who were working in the area and things too. So they're not necessarily people who live in our district. They're from all over.
Right.
So that impacts it.
And then the other thing I would throw in is that this isn't actual MIH. This is choosing to follow that framework. So would they also be suspect to, or have to follow that ruling?
Well, that one's interesting in that was never something in the zoning. That was basically HPD's policy. I don't frankly know how and where it started. I know at least that it's not in the zoning resolution. But I do think that they're right. I do think that Essex Crossing is relevant in a few ways, in that one, that was also publicly owned land. That was, where they partnered with private developers, and where they did feel comfortable providing some sort of set aside, which I guess is based on community, but based on households that have been impacted by previous, actions. I would say it's right that it is for this scenario where it is public land, and whereas you're saying it's not really geography based, and frankly, because this is largely political, where the story is very clear, you have a very clear way of saying, that you're going to understand right away, why these households need to be helped here. And then it's a matter of, I would think then that if you can move the state, then it's a matter of what that percentage might be. And, I could pass along what it is for Essex. I don't recall, but that would be something to look into.
But just to be clear, so the Essex set aside, so when they did this new building, is it, or this complex that they built, is it for people who specifically were removed because that complex was being built, or for anyone who lived in the general area?
It was for people who had, and it's a tricky thing, but I think some families have been able to get their restitution. It's for families that were displaced from their homes when the city urban renewal when the city tore down all the
Their
tenements that
so-
were in that neighborhood. So
To
it is
be
not
replaced by
anybody in
this
Community
complex.
Board 3. It is someone who has to provide paperwork to
Right.
show that they were living there or their descendants were living there, you know, in the 60s.
Does the Essex Crossing also have a building that's dedicated to seniors only?
Yes, it does. And that's a whole other thing, right? I mean, the
Yeah.
senior housing would be, there's not those same issues with senior housing. There's programs and other, you know, funding that can be specifically for senior housing. So, you know, I think what you could try for, right, is a mix of preference. And frankly, the way you go about saying, you know, we want some dedicated to senior housing, that's almost its own thing. Then we want a preference set aside for these specific communities, which I'm using broadly just for how you define, you know, what the, and then the rest would be general affordable that anybody in the city would be able to apply for, which I think is also a powerful way to say otherwise as well, to be saying, you know, when you look at the demographics, you know, statistically, this is a very wealthy, difficult neighborhood to move into, you know, a very white neighborhood, and this is a way to also make this neighborhood more inclusive. And you pair that then with ways of taking care of folks who have been impacted within the community as well.
Great.
Everybody got quiet.
Everyone's thinking of the
Just thinking.
possibilities. Chris,
Yeah.
that's such a great analog, Essex Crossing.
Yeah. No, this has been so helpful.
Very
and
good. I'm glad.
yeah,
Yeah, I think it's great that you all are, you know, are pushing for that. I think that it's such an opportunity anywhere, but especially in a district like yours where it's just really hard to get affordable housing. You know, the market isn't there. Like, developers are not building affordable unless they have to generally. And so, you know, I think it's a really strong thing that you all are trying to push.
Are you available to help us put together our package for this as we kind of go forward? Or could you, or could we get an advisor or two to help us with this?
You know, I'm happy to chat again. I unfortunately couldn't commit to any kind of dedicated capacity. I'm just a bit too well, two things. I have a lot, as we all do, on our plate, and we are a member org, so we work for and follow the lead of our members. So we don't generally provide stuff for community boards, but always happy to do these types of things, of sort of helping to build the capacity for you all and share what knowledge we can. But certainly, like, happy to have you guys reach out at any time.
Is there anyone or any direction you could suggest where we could get a little more expertise from? Because this is a big thing and we really need to get it right.
Yeah, yeah. You know, there are groups like Hester Street Collaborative, which, you know, they do a lot of community planning and sort of TA to community groups. They might be one set to try. You know, I'm trying to think of
Chris, I was
Definitely.
wondering about like the Furman Center. You had mentioned them, and I just see they do so much interesting research. Do you think that might be a good resource?
I think they'd be a great resource for research. I don't think they do community planning or sort of technical assistance. You know, there's also a planner, George Janes, who does a lot of work with community boards.
We've hired him before.
Yeah, I was going to say I spoke with him to a committee of CB1 about 6 months ago. But I think George is great, and he might be someone to reach out to.
What about the Pratt? I know Pratt Institute has some sort of, I had asked Lucian this before. Lucian, what was the name of it?
Pratt has a community planning organization.
But they help, didn't they help with the, up at
Is it
Columbia, they helped that
maybe Pratt?
community?
Yeah, well, it's certainly something that, we can keep brainstorming on it, but you all should really get some technical stuff out of Chris while he's with you. If there's any other kind of questions or, a kind of project background, anything, other analogs, because we can put together a list of organizations, whenever, but we're only going to get Chris tonight. So I would urge you all to really get everything out of him that you can.
Can I ask a question? And I'm so sorry. I'm on my phone and on my computer and like all over the place. So I apologize in advance for being out of line. So I just went raising my hand and I can't even see if it's raised. May I?
Yes, you may.
I'm facilitating, but great.
Okay, no, sorry. So Chris, I'm so sorry. Thank you. This is Justine Kucha, and I'm looking at your I'm looking at the chart, and is this accurate that there's only 61 affordable homes left in Lower Manhattan? Is that what that chart?
Are you?
Justine, what you're seeing is
I see. Yeah.
how many affordable units were generated
Right.
in the last 20 years or so.
Okay, that's still pretty bad.
Yeah.
How many do we have now? And maybe you said this already, and I'm so sorry if you did. How many do we have now?
I don't think we said that,
No,
but
no,
basically, we've created 61 new ones, and we know we've lost.
Yeah.
We've
I know we've
lost.
lost hundreds, and we're looking to lose
and
more.
it's-
But
yeah.
but Chris, I guess taking on what Lucian was saying, are you the person to be giving us the information so that we know the answers to the questions?
Well, and
Or where do we go to find it?
yeah. Well, and first I'll just point out one thing on this because it's sort of a deceiving way that they created this chart, because here they're
Right.
saying this is the average number of affordable units.
Mhm.
So to the left, you'll see they say that there's been a little over 1,000 created, so built or renovated from 2000 to 2017.
Sure.
Which is still a very, which is still a small amount, but just sort of with the numbers, like 61 is, I think what they're saying, that's on average how many are created a year. It is true that, but it is true that CB1 does not have many affordable units, and in terms of newly created is on the lower end. I did a report recently that I can share that has numbers on this as well, but
That would be helpful.
yeah, I mean, what we saw when we looked since 2014 at completed housing units, about 150 affordable units have been completed. That's about 8% of units completed
Okay.
in the district since 2014.
But you also have to look at how many have expired with 421A or 421G or whatever the letter is that goes with it.
Yeah.
That has expired, and how many buildings have gone co-op or condo, and how many more are planned. We're now losing another building to co-op, I think, in Battery Park City. I just found out recently. And of which there's some affordable housing. I don't know the statistics of that, but it just keeps going on and on and on in terms of things lost.
Right.
So part of where I believe the people who are pushing, I am one, for 100% affordability at 5 World Trade Center is, I guess what I want to say, and maybe it's been said already, and I apologize if it has, but the system is what it is, and I get, and I think I understand a little bit about what you were talking about, or your agency was talking about at the last meeting, about how there's only so much money that can go and be spent, and obviously the pie or the pot is finite, and to build affordable housing in Manhattan is going to build a lot less affordable housing than if you're going to build it in, you know, Arkansas, okay, or wherever the land is cheaper. Or so I get that. All that said, what I want to just sort of throw out is the model is broken, because part of what would be so much better is, instead of having ghettos created for poor, ghettos created for rich, which is what we have in Manhattan, and that's kind of, and nothing in between, because the middle class is gone. Moderate income is gone. There's no place to stay here. You're hanging on by your fingernails to stay here. What is the city and what are any of these agencies looking to do to accomplish and keep people in their homes? Because every person you push out of Lower Manhattan is a person who is pushing someone else out in Brooklyn, who is then pushing out someone else in the Bronx, who is then pushing out someone else, I don't know where, but it's just going and going, and the gentrification continues. And it's a bigger picture. And I think that the system is broken and you all need to do something to change the system. Thank you.
Yes, Justine, I hear you. And just for clarification, I am a nonprofit that's just providing technical advice today. So I 100% agree with you all. Our mission is for more affordable housing. So I don't work for the city. I don't work for.
Got it. Okay, I'm so sorry.
Yeah, no worries. But just so it's clear, no, that's okay. We are affordable housing advocates. So
excellent.
So yeah, so just to reiterate, Justine, I gave this at the very, very, very beginning. So the people who are just signing on, Chris is here to provide a viewpoint that is not influenced by the city or the developer or anyone else. So you all can have his perspective and perspective of the not-for-profit world that's looking to maximize affordable housing and fight gentrification and all those things. So.
Okay, no, that's so helpful, and I'm sorry, Chris. I apologize.
No worries. No, I just wanted to make sure it was clear.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. The other thing I wanted to throw out there, though, is that with World Trade Center number 5, the 30% that they are proposing will be affordable forever. So it is not like, in a program where eventually it can opt out. So I'm sure, by pushing for 100% affordability, they're then going to skirt it somehow.
Affordable forever too, but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, but I'm sure they're going to try to skirt. I'm just throwing this out there around that and say if they increase the amount of units, then they will somehow take away that affordability forever status and at some point be able to opt out of the program, which is a problem.
They probably would try that. I mean, the good thing so far is that we have a lot of our state representatives that are in support of what we're trying to do. And we have a few of our federal representatives that are in support of, very strong support of what we're trying to do. One of which, Karen Maloney, she just did her own bill in August, for a similar thing. She's pushing for 100% affordability in a different way. She's trying to do co-ops for low-income people, like deeply affordable co-ops for low income. So she's like way in on this,
You mean someplace else or at this site?
Everywhere, it was her and Congresswoman Ehan that co-sponsored the bill. And so, we have people that are really, really interested in truly affordable housing, not just as a phrase to throw around and for it to be permanent.
Right. I think it's all great. I just think we need to learn how to propose or what we have to propose, because it's all about how they can afford to build it and keep it permanently affordable.
Totally agree.
And so
yeah, I just think it's to our benefit that we have all these, government. We have all this government support, and we could use more. But we
need the government to support to actually show how, come up with the money. Exactly. Come up with the money.
But part of what I might say to you, Pat, is that if you think outside the box, not you personally, but if people, we as a community think outside the box and try to change it up from the beginning. So part of it is, what is it going to cost? How much money are people going to make? Who's going to buy it? Who's going to build it? All these things. What about insisting that there are public benefit corporations that only new buildings are built by public benefit corporations, so the profit is capped at a certain amount? mean, I still can't, it galls me what happened with Gateway Plaza, where it was a basically public benefit corporation that was able to weasel its way out of being the affordable entity in Battery Park City. That it was the place to go for affordable housing in Lower Manhattan.
IPN, a
But-
whole bunch of places, but
But
think
yeah,
the
I mean,
thing
I speak to what I know, but basically when it was, there were loopholes and they managed to get out of that, and we could do better, seeing the mistakes that were made in the laws as it was created, going forward and looking better. And I think we lose the whole affordability argument when we ask, what do they need to build it? I think we need to look at it and say, what do we need to be built? And I just really, I'm telling you, we need to shake up the whole system and change it up from the bottom to the top. And until we do that in our
I don't
minds, it's
disagree
not
with
going to
you,
change.
but I still think it all comes down to dollars and cents, and so we have to figure out.
No, I agree with you. It does, but I think that our perspective and our advocacy, when I throw this out to you, Chris, to see, because I know you've been in the trenches of it. I'm just a big mouth with no, nothing behind me but ideas. But to see how it would work out, and how do you break down the walls to say, enough now? These numbers are, considering how many people live in Lower Manhattan, how many people live in New York City, these numbers are pathetic. And that's that, and I get it's expensive, but how about we turn it around and say, you know what? It's expensive because we allow it to be expensive. It's expensive because everybody is looking and chasing the almighty dollar, and every landlord and every builder and everybody else is looking not to make 25%, which is a really good return on investment, right? They're looking to make, 250, 300% and more, and at the expense of people in their homes. And that's what's unconscionable. And that's the numbers that I would love to be seen and have a conversation about. I mean, and I could be crazy. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe none of that's true. But I don't think so.
The only thing I want to do, though, Justine, is I want to bring the conversation back, because there's a bigger conversation, obviously, about New York City. But then this conversation, I think, has to specifically remain on World Trade Center number 5 and the information that we all need to be able to fight to get World Trade Center number 5 either 100% affordable or more than 30% affordable. And so I think that's the information that, if Chris can offer us more of that information, that's what we need.
That makes sense. And I'm going to shut up now, but I'm going to say that I think the only way it's going to work
I don't disagree with you.
is to break it up. We have to go back to the drawing board on 5, because if they're looking to be making profit and making as much money as possible, they're not going to do anything that we're asking.
Yeah, I mean,
Could I jump in really quick?
Sure.
Can we talk about a little bit about subsidies? I think we've danced around the subject a little bit here. It's pretty clear that that for this project to pencil out for a private developer, there would have to be some kind of subsidy involved, because without market rate units, there would be no cross subsidy, right? If it was 100% affordable. So, Chris, can you talk a little bit about subsidies and do you offhand, can you talk about like the typical subsidy per unit? Because I think that we just need to wrap our heads around the type of term sheets that might be at play here, or funding sources, because they'll definitely talk about what funding that they have access to versus the amount of funding they would need to be 100% affordable. So I think we should be prepared for that conversation.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, I don't have a number for subsidy per unit, and that's also going to vary based on development. But I would stress again, here that it's the state that is giving the land away. And that's, I think, the central, as we were saying at the beginning, that's sort of the central piece for you all. And then, I do think sort of the money is there, like, yeah, for you. Anyway, I'm not going to have a good answer sort of in terms of saying this should be, use this program and this program. I think especially for a project like this, but I think that, the fact that it's public is key. trying to understand, as we were saying before, what subsidies they're already taking. I think almost sort of flipping it and saying, what do you need? It's not up to the CB to say this is what, this is how you get there, but what do you need to make this 100% affordable? And then thinking about ways that you can also, places that you can give, it can be 100% affordable, but in some cases, 100% affordable can mean up to 165% AMI. So I think when it comes to negotiations, that can be something to consider. Do you trade off more at the higher end? That does start to get into that cross subsidy. That does start to get closer to market rate rents. On the flip side, another consideration is, do you push for deeper AMIs, but not 100% affordable? But you push for more on the 30-40% AMI end, and not higher up. And then Lucian, I would just offer too, I know you were speaking with Elliot at our office, but they might be able to provide a little more detail on sort of specific subsidy questions as well, if that's useful for you all.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that all of our members and the public were more conversant in that, just because I know that we talked about it a little bit in August when we were talking about subsidy. I know that they had Nadler had sent a letter asking for them to fully tap into Section 8 funding, potential funding, and they said they looked at it, and Section 8's tapped out in the whole region. And then I had brought up a point about the potential of whether in the upcoming federal budget, if we're to pass, there'd be lots of money in subsidy that could be unlocked for the state of New York, and that it would be worth waiting to see if some of those monies become available. I floated that along, but I just know that could be a
I think that's a great
difference
point.
between
I think Nadler agrees with that perspective too, Lucian, that there could be a lot of money for affordable housing coming through.
Yeah, he does. That was the way he explained it. And Maloney's office also said similar things about the Section 8. So maybe they know something that the state doesn't know yet in terms of money that's going into the program. But also I wanted to mention that our assemblywoman was recently quoted in one of the papers as saying, to Justine's point, that we really need to start coming up with new ways, like in creating new programs and thinking outside the box and of how we can get something like this done. She's another 1,000% proponent of what we're proposing, and wants to figure out a way to do it, not necessarily within the confines of what exists currently.
Yeah, and also, I think maybe, I'm sure Jill or Mariama or somebody made clear, part of the conversation for us too with the 100% affordable is we're not asking particularly for 100% to be at 50% of AMI. We're asking for the tiered housing, right? So if you've got some moderate and some middle, and I don't want luxury, but if you have to have some just to make it come to something, so people are making ends meet, okay, that's reasonable, because what you're doing is creating a community, and you're not creating silos of income, all low income in one place, all rich in one place, all this in one place, all that in one place. We all are a community. We all should be together, and that's.
I think we've been clear that we wanted variable incomes. And also, I'm wondering, is there rent protection even for the higher end people? Because something was wiped out down here with Gateway in terms of using rent stabilization to keep a community together.
Exactly.
That's something, Chris, you think we can argue for as well?
And I think that would be
for like 40% because they can. That's not right.
Yeah, I mean, generally, any unit that is part of the a regulatory agreement, essentially is entering rent stabilization, and then it's actually the case with with 421A that the market rate units are also supposed to receive that protection as well. 421A is not, I mean, it's not a program that we generally advocate for. So,
Good program at
you know,
all.
but just so you all know that you know, that is some of the conditions. But as with the affordable, that's during the 30-year tax abatement period, and then that expires. But again, like if you were able to get if there were higher end affordable units, so towards the 165, which again starts to, you know, and maybe not in CD1, but in a lot of neighborhoods, you know, is at or exceeding sort of market rate already. Those would also be part of the regulatory agreement and would have their rents regulated. So that is again like a way to consider if it's 100% affordable, but you have a tier of units, as you were saying, at that higher end. That more moderate, or I mean, frankly, middle income or even high income, I think by most people's standards. But they do have rent protection as well. And you could then think about how you trade off some of those higher end units for exactly how you get those tiers of units.
Right.
But everyone is covered with those protections.
Yeah. Right. Good to know. Thank you.
You know, that is really good information. And yeah, anything that expires is bad because it destroys community.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering, how fixed is it that Silverstein has this? Is there any alteration of that? He actually, in a lot of ways, owns the World Trade Center site and has a lot of control here. And does it remain that way? And he happens to get World Trade Center 5 too, or is that unalterable, or is there anything to do about that, or any options?
Yeah, that's one I don't know just with the details of this particular arrangement, and you all might know more. I mean, it seems like it has been like they won the RFP, right? But I don't believe they've leased leased the ground yet, essentially, right? Or have leased the.
To my understanding, the contracts haven't been signed yet, right? So
But we don't know about the ground. We have to find out about that now. That's a question
Yeah.
we have to ask.
Yeah.
For
think
On the
we need
last
to
meeting
know-
that we had, they basically said that one of the reasons why they couldn't explain the specifics of the financials is because they were still being negotiated. And so obviously they wouldn't want to publicly share, the terms that were still being negotiated because that would work against them. So the contract has not been signed yet. So
Although-
it's not a done deal as far as I'm aware.
But I think it's on the horizon. I think time is short on that. And they're
would
not
think
being
so.
They're
forced.
negotiations right now. Yes.
Yeah.
Right,
And they're not being forthcoming at all.
And
But I
just
was wondering,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
just since we have you here for a little while, what would be the characteristics, or who would be the ideal developer or owner of this, that we could, if we could make a pitch for such a thing, who would that be, and what would they be like?
Well, I think it would be, it's tricky because it's such a, and I'm trying to not let the, I'm trying to not let the World Trade Center site as it stands now be the sort of image that I have in mind. But I think, there are, it would be probably a private, a mix of for-profit, nonprofit that partner to do this.
We
But
have that
again, the
already.
image I have
Yeah.
in mind is sort of the giant tower, but a group like Riseborough, which is they are working on a project on the Long Island City waterfront right now. I think a lot of bad things have happened there, but this is about 75% affordable, I believe. It
What is
is
the name
pretty
again?
tall.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Riseborough. So,
Riseborough.
yeah,
Right.
Riseborough. And I have to remind myself who they're. I don't even have it somewhere here. Sort of who they're.
And that's in New York City?
That is in New York City.
They're
They're
in
based
Brooklyn.
in Bushwick, yeah, in Brooklyn. and they do a lot of affordable housing development. And sorry, I'm trying to see because I did have it somewhere at some point.
While you're looking at that, there are two, and Rosa, I'm having a mental, there are two
About
not for
how
profit.
about the rose companies? Oh, sorry.
No, but there are two not-for-profit specialists who are involved in this project, who are the ones who are working on the 30%
On the affordable, yeah, yeah. Do you know who who they
Correct.
are? Yeah,
Who's gonna say?
I apologize, I cannot remember the name.
yeah,
We could get this information.
yeah.
We could get. I have it in my other notes, but it isn't here.
Yeah, they were brought in by the for-profit developers to
Right,
yeah,
consult on the not-for-profit portion. But there's also L+M development. They
Okay,
do
yeah.
a lot of affordable housing. And Bob, I believe you were also referring to Jonathan Rose
Yes, I thought
and his
they're
company.
Yeah.
Yes,
yeah,
Yeah.
they
they're really
also do not-for-profit.
Yeah.
Or not, sorry, not for profit, but they do affordable housing. And a lot of times these kinds of firms will actually team up to do projects like this. But I think that if you're really looking at doing something that is 100% affordable, then the more sort of for-profit developer may not really be the right partner for that. And then at that point, you really need to go back to the various agencies that are handling this project for the state and say we basically need to start another RFP and see who would respond, because I think that the mission there is just not aligned with the goal, right? So right now they're on a different track, and this team and this track and your goals, I do not think align very well. So, I mean, and I actually have a question for Chris as well. I mean, let's say that if the goal is 100% affordable with varying rates of affordability, what is the incentive for the developer to do that? Beyond being like a publicly minded mission,
Yep.
you know, from the company, but what is the goal? I mean, why?
Can I throw
What's their
something
incentive?
to as part of answering that question for Rosa? Is it true that the HUD funding would make the developer whole with the difference between the rent paid and the subsidy from Rosa? I mean, from Rosa, the subsidy.
Oh, I get a subsidy?
In other words, would the developer be made whole with HUD paying the difference between what the rent is paid by the tenant?
Yeah, right. If they were doing Section 8 vouchers, or if they were doing, well, I mean, I think to your right, Rose. I think it gets to the point that you're making in that that is not Silverstein's model. They are not affordable housing developers, and I think that that you're right in saying, so a company like Jonathan Rose or someone who does affordable housing, they then have a model that, yeah, they have a different model, and with the subsidy and with the way they are able to build so that they're still making a profit but providing affordable housing. And so I think it would be right a question of I think that I would say, I guess strategically, right, I think you push for what you want, and then it's a question of, does that mean the fight then becomes to change the RFP? At some point it might be a fallback. If it is Silverstein, then it's how far can you push them? How much affordable can you get? How much deep affordable can you get? Or how many, or is it about the set asides? The thing as we've said, I mean, this type of project, if it was a private project in Community District 1, I think doesn't look so bad compared to what gets built there now, just in terms of the affordable numbers. But it's public land, and it is an opportunity to do do a lot more. And I'm sorry that I
Can
will
we
have to go
insist
in
on
just
it?
a moment, but
Is this a real opportunity for us to reverse the plan to give it to Silverstein? Is there any way to possibly invoke a move to Riseboro or something like Jonathan Rose Companies? Is that even possible? Is that something we can at least try for?
I think you should try. I mean, I think that the again, this sort of gets into politics and strategy more, but I think that you ask for what you want to see, you work to try to build that power. And if you want to start trying to, reach out to those groups or build, see what possibilities there are. And I don't know right where, in terms of just timing,
Yeah,
how close
Chris.
it is to being sort of baked in. Also, sort of what sort of leverage you have with the general plan modifications. And I unfortunately don't know the process there, but who ultimately signs off on those? Is it an
Well,
elected official?
My
and I
my
was gonna
complaint is
say,
that
I'm sorry, Bob.
there's been no public voice in this at all. I mean, we didn't have
Yeah.
anything that they don't come to the community board. We never hear about these things going to bid.
Right.
They're just grabbed by the wealthy.
Right.
Well, we hear
and
about it, but we
I-
hear about it through the media. So Chris, a question, I guess, relating to what Bob is saying. Would this have to be, if the RFP has been awarded already and it's just a matter of them signing contracts, wouldn't we have to get a lawyer and fight this legally to reverse this process?
I mean, that's likely, and again, I don't know enough about where they are at, but it might be, if it's leverage to at least to be put, if it does end up being Silverstein, but the push is then
Oh, it's
for
gonna be
more
Silverstein.
and for as much as you can, as much as you can get. But yeah, I'm sorry I don't have like a great answer, but
Yeah, that's
just because
I don't know what your timing is. So what time you're giving
I
us?
do need to go, and I'm sorry that I
Yes.
can't.
Okay,
more,
so the
but-
one thing I wanted to say to you is next week is the executive. Lucian, what's the date for the executive committee meeting?
It's the 29th.
29. So if you're interested, Chris, that is when a World Trade Center number 5's team is going to come to uh, to the executive committee meeting for Community Board 1, and they have been told that they should be prepared to have questions and to answer questions because they have not given the public any opportunity to engage with them. So if you're just interested in hearing, that would be an opportunity for you to hear, what has gone on so far.
Yeah, thank you. I will see if I can just tune into that.
Yeah, and if not, you can always get the recording also.
No, that's great.
Mhm.
Chris,
and-
thank
So that's
Thank
number
you
one.
so much.
Lucian has my
Well, I
contact,
just
so
had
yeah,
one-
feel free to. Yeah, of course.
One more issue. Do we have any people from the public that are not part of the committee that wanted to ask any questions?
Well, I don't see any hands up, but then again, we didn't
Okay.
prompt for it. So let me just take
Yeah,
a
and
really
I
quick
meant to
look
say
here.
that, and I'm sorry, Chris, maybe you could answer one question from the
Yeah, I
public
think I
if
can stay
somebody's
for
there.
one if folks have.
All right, let's see if the hand comes up.
And if there isn't anyone that wants to ask now,
I'm
if
not
we
seeing
come up.
any hands go up.
Okay, so if we come up with any questions, can we feel free to, I know, you're devoting your time to giving us your time, which we appreciate. But would you
course,
mind if
but
we
yeah,
had a few questions that we could
No,
send
not
them
at all.
to
I'm
you
happy
and
to
ask?
try to answer what I can or help as I can.
Great, thank you so much. Well, we all are appreciative of you giving us your time, which of course you could be having dinner or doing some other things. So thank you so much for coming and answering these questions that we have.
Of
Thank
course,
you,
my
Chris.
pleasure, and glad you all are fighting the good fight. Take care.
Trying to be well,
Always,
enjoy,
yeah,
and
that's all we can do. Well, thank you all.
hopefully we'll see you again.
Thank
Thank
you,
you,
Chris.
Chris.
Thank you, thank you,
Thanks,
thank you.
Have a nice evening.
Bye. You too.
Thanks,
Good
Chris. Thank
night.
you so much.
Thank you. Good night.
So again, I apologize, committee, for being late, and thank you both, Mariama and Lucian. Are there any is there a conversation to be continued with the committee now? Are there other things you want to discuss about
That-
this?
If there's one last thing that I wanted to show everyone,
Mhm.
because for all the units that are, in the housing lottery that we were talking about, I want to make sure that everyone's um, aware of the housing lottery and how do you even get access to these affordable units if I can just really quick.
Sure. Yeah, because they're housing, there's one in our community right now, unless it's
Yeah, so
closed.
there are units out there right now, and there's lotteries for places. Now, this is a site called NYC Housing Connect. Can everyone see this site?
Yep.
Yeah. So you can make a free profile. This is run by the city, Housing Preservation and Development, and um, there's rental lotteries, and then there's housing ownership lotteries as well. So this is actually, I know this one. This is an HDFC. It's in East Harlem. It's actually quite close to where I live. And they just got renovated this building on 116th and say 3rd, or literally Lex. And so there's opportunities to own an apartment. And then here's the open rental library. So here's one for Day Street. Here's 7 Day Street. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. This one's relevant to our interests.
Right, that's the one.
Let's see. It was being a little slow when I was loading it up before the meeting started, so I may have to just re-load. Oh, here we are.
Is Cora on? Because Cora
Cora
has,
is on. Let me see. Hold on. You want Cora? I'll move Cora over. Cora, I'm moving you over. Wait, there's 2 Coras. I'm moving all the Coras. Okay, so
Plethora
here's
of
7
Coras.
Day Street. Lottery ends in 41 days. Who should apply? Here's the amenities, blah, blah, blah. Oh my God. Okay, now here's the units. So they're telling you how many studio apartments are available, how many 1 bedrooms, how many 2 bedrooms, what the AMI percentage is. So this is what we went over at the beginning of the meeting. And effectively, this is what it means, right? So for the studio, they're willing to entertain 1 or 2 person households, not a 5-person household, obviously. But for the 2 bedroom, they're willing to entertain up to 5 people. And maybe you could even say more, but they're certainly not advertising it for more. But $167,000 combined income for a 5-person household. So what you would do is you would click apply now. You would say you've read things if you did read it. And I actually don't know how much I want to click through this because you have to confirm the household size. So maybe you have to fill this out as a profile before, but once you have a profile, you can just go willy-nilly applying for these lotteries and see if your number is called. But I encourage everyone to look through these because
And of course, this 7 to 8 doesn't have any preferential for people who live in the community, right?
no,
It's just open to-
it used to be that they would have a 50% set aside. In fact, full disclosure, I live in affordable housing that probably living in East Harlem helped me secure the unit. And it was a housing lottery, but it wasn't like this. It was like you send something in the mail and they put it in a trash bag and they pull it out one by one and put a number on it. So this is a lot easier and you can apply for lots of them really quickly. So I would just say to all the people on this meeting, this is free. This is a city service. This is for New Yorkers. This is something you should send to anybody who's looking for affordable housing. And you can see what transit lines are close by. So that's my plug for housing because
Well,
we're advocating for all these new units, but if you don't know how to get the units, then it doesn't even matter. So we should all know how to get these units.
But also,
is there any,
so look
I'm
at the, I was gonna just say, look at the rents and look at the incomes that go with the rents. They're actually
Well,
really expensive for the incomes.
It's
Yeah,
30%,
yeah.
right? 30%, I think, is typically what they peg it at because anything over 30%
Yeah, no,
is.
I hear you, but I can tell you that the money here would not be something that I would be able to pay based on the income they're saying. I wouldn't do it.
Right.
It's more than 70% of the income for some of them.
Right.
also with 70% of the
And
units
that
being
doesn't, it's gross
studios,
income, right?
you're talking about a single person
Yeah.
only.
Right.
You know, you just nix
Yeah.
Well, that's why
families
we all laugh when they say
or
affordable.
single moms, right?
Yeah.
This could be a single mom salary, $45,000, and now she can't live there because there's a child with her that she's, you know,
Right,
I don't
exactly.
know. This,
But that's why we all, yeah, this is why it's crazy.
Well, yeah,
What I
that's
wanted
right.
to ask was
Next.
though about
Right.
senior, I'm thinking of, myself.
That-
Senior, is on this site, are there is there senior housing also
I
on this
believe
site?
so. Let me just back up really quick and see if I can.
And while you're doing that, does
see if I
Cora want to add
filter.
anything to this conversation?
Cora? No, you may just check that you don't have two microphones
Hello.
unlocked, Cora. See, now it's not loading.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I
Yes.
can hear you, Cora.
Oh,
Hey,
okay,
Cora.
good. No, I don't. I think it's a very good discussion. And Lucian showed that NYC Housing Connect is very important that we get good at it. And once you once you set up an account, you'll be able to just click, update, apply. And from my experience working with other people, if you don't apply, another 100 people just tonight is already in the system. So
Right.
don't even think about it. And also remember, there's still a screening process. So pressing the button doesn't mean that you are in. And you shouldn't even think about whether or not you should apply or not apply. As soon as you see any of the qualifications that you are eligible, I was told that I should apply, as long as you're falling into that. Don't worry about later on that you may not be qualified. There's another whole screening process that can happen or take about like 2, 3, 4 months for people to screen people. And if you hear about the Essex crossing, it was Councilmember Chin who advocated for that housing, senior housing that was discussed earlier. It was like 60,000 applications. And then when the other buildings opened, that was like by the 50,000 people apply. But don't worry about it. Just set up an account and press the button.
Cora,
And was that Essex, is that Essex housing, senior housing, was that supportive housing or was that just housing, plain housing, no
It's
services?
senior housing, 100% senior housing. So the amenities, the elevator, the lobby, the security staff.
There's on-site services for
Grand
seniors as
Street
well.
Settlement is the service organization over there helping.
Cora, in terms of that model for Essex and the senior housing, is there anything applicable that we should be aware of that we could bring into the 5 World Trade Center discussion as well? Like, how'd you do it?
It's two whole different projects. Like Chris explained to you, Access Crossing is the urban renewal project, and the former site tenants did have the preference. But that was 50 years ago. By the time when the project is done, not too many former site tenants around. And it's really hard to provide proof of documentation. So if you do think about suggesting some kind of preferences or dedicated X number of housing that you would like to propose for 9/11 survivors, you may think about how the process is to suggest to the agency to make it simple for the 9/11 survivors.
You mean to
When
prove
they
that
have to
they are
prove
9/11?
their identity, or just like I know from Kimberly Flynn, she told me a lot of people, they have problems trying to find documentation to prove you were there on 9/11.
Yeah.
Yeah, so do put it in your to-do list when this actually happened, what kind of hardship for the application process for the group that you would like to see dedicated to.
So my question more is, this is 80 stories of apartment, and we want, I'll use the word carve out for not having a better term. We want mixed income, and we want one of the carve outs to be for senior citizens. Is there something that your office had done specifically that enabled or promoted that carve out for seniors, which would be amongst the several groups we were looking at carve outs for?
Well, every site is different. So I'm going to bring your question back to my colleague, Anthony Drummond. He is the land use and housing and planning. I can also put his contact over there, and probably you can have a direct conversation with him.
Right.
Well, could we invite him to come? Because Mariama had someone also she wanted to invite to come from Nadler's office, right, Mariama? Is Mariama still on?
Mhm.
Did we lose Mariama?
Let me quick make sure she didn't fall into
Yeah.
the attention section. No, she's
And
on.
Ted, I can connect you with Anthony first. You can have an initial conversation with him. Why don't we do that?
Because he might be able to talk about how specific funding worked for that carve out.
Right, but I was going to say, and could we invite him for next month? And
every
even
site
though
is different.
I'm sorry.
Every site, I'm repeating myself, every site is
Right, right.
different. And where's the subsidies? Right? From the city or state or federal, where does the money come from? So I strongly suggest that you have an initial conversation with Anthony to just kind of learn more about it.
Right. So even though it will be after, and it might be better that it's after the conversation that we're going to have with World Trade Center number 5 team, that maybe next month we invite Anthony. And do we get Mariama and the person from Nadler's office that Mariama wanted to invite?
Robert Atterbury.
There you go. Maybe it'd be a good meeting to have both of them come next month and continue this conversation. And anyone else that, anybody comes up with.
Let me ask you this, Pat, because of time being of the essence, would we want to just do a housing subgroup meeting before that? Or do you want to
before next month, before next week, before when?
Before next month's meeting? Do we feel that time is of the essence, that we want to get this as much information as we can?
I mean, if those two people are willing to talk to a group, sure. And there are people who are willing to attend a meeting that is not, a CB1 meeting, add another meeting to their month, sure. Why not?
It's a CB1 meeting, but not a committee of, regular.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure, why not?
Or like the housing subcommittee?
Correct.
Or something different?
No, housing.
No, housing. No.
Yeah.
Sure, if we get people who are willing to go to a meeting and we can get guests who are willing to come, why not?
I do feel, and I thank Lucian very much for this, because I do feel speaking with Chris really gave us a lot of food for thought.
Information for next week, sure.
Yeah. So.
And that's the whole point, is that even though you have your other committee, group that you formed, this gave you just additional information. So going into next week's meeting, where I do hope that World Trade Center number 5, will give the public the opportunity to ask questions, and they may say, we'll have to get back to you, but at least you get your questions out there, aired to the public.
To that point, I guess this is a question for Lucian. So many folks were on that last exec committee call, members of the public. They wanted to ask their questions. They sat through, the hours of the other stuff, and they didn't get a chance. Inviting them again, is there going to be opportunity for them to speak? It obviously doesn't reflect well on anyone, and that's as a community board, to not allow the public to speak to this important issue.
Yeah,
then-
I think Jill, to answer your question, yes, the public will have an opportunity to speak. We're purposefully leaving a lot more space in the agenda. August being the only committee meeting of the month, everything kind of gets packed in. So there wasn't time for lots of members of the public to speak. So that's why they wanted to do quality of life this month, but it didn't work on the schedule, which is why we're doing the prep session tonight. But for executive, they were able to schedule that meeting, and so the idea is to leave as much time as possible on the agenda for that to allow people time to speak.
Thank
I
you.
think
And
it's
then
not
once
technically
again,
going to
Just,
be a
just a
hearing.
note, licensing didn't make quorum yesterday, so those things are gonna come up on it.
Right, and that's one of the challenges. So
well,
we're gonna have a
just,
couple rollover
just
items.
to, Rosa will back me up on this, but just to make it clear, once again, because still I did say this to you, both Tammy and I were very forceful in telling them that when they come to executive committee meeting next week, that because last time people were not, the public was not given the opportunity to engage, that we expect them to be fully prepared, that there are questions that people want to ask, and the time should be allotted, that they shouldn't come in and say, oh, we've got to leave in, half an hour. They should know that they have to stay as long as people have questions.
That's wonderful. Thank you. Will we be able to make this the first agenda item
That's
as
what I was
well?
gonna ask, the first or the second, whatever, before licensing.
I would say
Licensing will
first.
take
That's up to
first.
Tammy.
That's up, but I
That's
mean,
up
can
to
we ask
Tammy.
that though and put that on the record as a request? Because the people from the public are gonna be frustrated if we spend, which is fair enough, but if we spend 3 hours on licensing and then have half hour for this, after they sit around all night.
Yeah, and that's what happened to them last time. So that's why I do feel it's
Yeah.
only fair they got to go first this time.
It looks like currently there's just the capital budget items is kind of a check-in thing. It's not meant to be an
Yeah.
exhaustive discussion, but just making sure all the committees are on track in discussing their capital budget items and getting people to contribute, because October is the month where executive has to vote, has to vote on the final budget items. But we're trying to get a check-in, so I think that's the first item because it's not going to take a long time. And then item 2 is site 5.
Okay.
And I
then
would
we
like
have-
to just ask, if possible, that people are civil in their discourse. I know that a lot of people are very fired up, but I do hope that we can actually just like have a respectful conversation, regardless of whether or not, if you disagree, then you disagree, but we should at least be, civil, because honestly, if they're not going to want to keep coming back to these things, if we keep screaming at them every time they come, right? That's pretty normal. Nobody would want to come to a meeting knowing that they're going to be screamed at for 2 hours. So keep that in mind when you're asking your questions and when you're responding to them, right?
But Rosa, are you asking us not to ask harsh questions then? Because
No, I'm not
No,
asking you
ask
not to ask hard
ask the
questions.
hard
but
questions.
be like recognize that that's a human being on the other side, right? And treat them the way that you would like to be treated in a conversation.
Of course, no,
Right.
that makes
Yeah.
sense, and it should not be, no name calling, no insulting. This is their job, but yeah, we get it.
Exactly.
That makes
That-
sense, of course.
Yeah, because I know that sometimes it doesn't go that way at some of these meetings, and honestly, as a community board member, it's not only frustrating, it's embarrassing to
Yeah.
see us essentially verbally throwing trash at the people that we are inviting to our meetings.
But
Well, I'm
also,
hoping
Rosa,
Tammy
just
will be-
remember, it's not the community board members. We also will have people from the
I
public.
think I hope, you know what?
Right, but hopefully we will be able to raise the level of discourse and actually
Yeah.
get to the meaty part of what we're trying to get to. And then just before I get off, there's one other thing I want to say, which is maybe for that separate meeting that you're talking about having to understand or wrap our heads around affordable housing, it would actually be very useful to have somebody from Jonathan Rose Companies or LTSM Development come, because then they can explain to us what is the financing structure that they use on their multiple, affordable housing projects that they do nationally, actually, not just in New York City. What's the funding structure that makes it possible, that actually makes it pencil out and work? And then seeing what of that is applicable in this specific situation. If you really want to understand how it works, then you should be talking to the people that actually work it out, right?
And
I agree
question for you of those
100%.
people, though, could I ask this question? So do they actually build the kind of housing we're asking for, or they build it where it's a small percentage and then, I don't
They
know.
do
if
it both ways. They do it both ways. They do fully affordable housing, and they do a variation of, you know, market with affordable. So they do the full range. And I think that those are actually two very reputable and experienced companies that would be helpful to connect with. And if you want, I can try to set up that connection. But I think that if you really want to go into the weeds of like, how do we get this done realistically, instead of just saying, you know, I want affordable housing, but without having a real understanding of what makes it possible or not possible.
Right.
We need to know how the financing structure works to be able to enable this. And it's not like this is the only project in New York that, you know, needs affordable housing or could possibly have affordable housing. So how has it worked on other sites? What has made it possible? What would be the difference between what's this site and other sites where it has been possible? And let's see if we can bridge that gap.
That would be great. Has it ever worked anyplace? Or has it ever
Of
been?
course. I mean, we're talking about Essex Crossing, so that's a project that worked in, right? I know Villa Verde up in
Harlem.
sorry, my dog has just come in the room.
Bronx. Sendero Verde is in East Harlem.
Sendero Verde.
And Manhattan Plaza, in terms of being affordable artist housing using Section 8 project funding. So, yes.
I could help to get Ryan Cassidy from Riseboro.
So would you all reach out, make these connections, and then let's find a date that works for everybody, which is going to be the biggest problem, is finding a date that works for everybody.
Well, that's why my question is, should we do it as a subcommittee meeting like ASAP?
Yes, but even still, it's going to be hard to get everybody to come, you know, everyone that wants to attend, and these experts that we're asking, they are generally booked up, and so trying to get everybody together on a night. So at least do the initial outreach, see if they're willing to come, and then let's try to work out a calendar date.
Yeah, because maybe we might need multiple calendar dates from them. So maybe we can ask for them to come, whether they'll commit to once every 6 weeks, something like, you know, and
well, I mean, remember, we're not paying anybody, so it is, yes, they're all volunteering their time.
So are we.
So,
so are we. I know.
Right, but you know, it's our project, so we have to, you know, figure out and ask them what they are willing to donate.
One person I'm going to try to reach out to that I'm sure many of you know very well is Matthew Washington. He's now the vice president of Phipps Houses, and they're one of the largest developers of affordable housing in the city. And and he has a special place for community boards in his heart.
Okay, so that would be great.
I
just wanted to ask one general question in the spirit of Justine and affordability, and that is that week after week, month after month, it's getting more expensive just to eat here and to stay here. So we actually have to begin to develop not just affordable housing, but affordable retail, affordable restaurants, a kind of a couple of notches down from where things are going. We have been famous in Battery Park City for having the most expensive grocery stores in the city, of which I have been, kind of helping them out for 2 decades.
Bob, when we were meeting with Brookfield, and meeting way before the World Trade Center site was completed, and we asked for grocery stores, and I said, like a real grocery store. A grocery store to me is where they sell toilet paper. So what did they put in? Italy, right? That's their idea of a grocery store. So anyway, this conversation continues.
Those are great, local amenities.
Right. We've got to move on because it's getting late, and I know everybody wants to go off and have somewhat of an evening. We had one last item on the agenda, right, Lucian? We were supposed to talk about the budget.
Yes, that's correct. And I also remembered that one item, and we may have to push this to October, is the questions for inclusion and equity. And I'm just hitting myself that
No, I thought about it a minute ago too.
yeah.
And I
So
was
maybe
gonna
that's something
ask
that we
you.
can do in October, because that's the DDC, our DDC oversight month. So it could be a little bit lighter, especially if there's going to be potentially a side conversation, a subcommittee meeting that offloads all the affordable housing to a separate day. So something to think about. But let's just talk. If I may, I can just jump into the budget stuff.
Yeah, just before you do that, Francis, are you still here? So think about Francis. Think about if you have anything in October that you want to put on the agenda. We still have Francis? Okay, anyway, go.
All right, so everyone, as you may have heard, we are in budget season. Um, it, it feels like it's a 12-month thing that you're always in budget season, but it's every month that goes by until the city council vote on the upcoming budget. There's more and more activity. But here at the beginning, we've just finished our borough budget consultations, which is where all the district managers organize along with OMB, a series of days where agencies come and talk about their capital and operating budgets in the borough of Manhattan and all the different programs. Um, that's a really just eye-opening experience. We've had a number of members of the board attend, I believe, a couple of these sessions. But we also have a huge amount of input to give. I would say that of the pillars that make up the responsibilities of the community board, advocating for the budget is one of those pillars. Land use is a pillar, licensing is a pillar. Providing something to the community for a forum for updates and conversation is a pillar. This is up there with everything else, and it's one of the most difficult pillars. Mainly because there's just so much work that needs to happen to kind of just send something off into the ether for a while. And it doesn't feel very satisfying like a land use vote, but it's nevertheless extremely important. And so I'm going to show you a website that I put together to assist in capturing input from the members and the public, and allow our executive committee to ultimately vote, rank and vote these items. So this is our budget requests portal for CB1. The address is just like our live meeting portal is live.mcb1.nyc. This is budget.mcb1.nyc. So I'll put that in the chat.
Can we get an email, please, instead of a chat? Chat?
Yes, I can send that in.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure. So what I want to point out to you all, this has almost everything you may need to know. Our district needs statements, which is what we've said is necessary that we need for the capital and operating budgets for the city and all the different agencies. I have fiscal years 2020, 2021. I'll add 2022 in here as well. I have some information, explanations of what the differences are between the expense budget, or I say operating budget a lot, but I use it synonymously as expense budget, and then also the capital budget. And these are all links to different city resources, how they define that and go more into depth. These are important distinctions that need to be preserved in our budget considerations, or else there's no way that what we want fits in with the city system. I have a database that's linked to the site, in that you can see what sorts of things we requested for the last fiscal year, which is now our current fiscal year. And then a link to new requests. So you all can make requests right now, and we can have a discussion about it next month. Next month is our last chance to discuss it. The executive committee will be voting. So do or die on this one. So far, we have 2 new additions for budget requests. This form will show you, whenever somebody uses this form here, budget request ideas, This is how you put in a request for a new item. It will come up here on this list. So you'll see anything that anybody puts in. It's just, we're trying to be as transparent as possible.
Lucian, I got a question. So DOT puts in bathrooms? That's who does it?
If the bathroom is in a public right of way, it would be DOT's responsibility.
Like in a park?
No, then it would be park's responsibility. If it were on like a plaza, if it were on the sidewalk,
Mhm.
or if they if there was like like Barnett Newman Triangle, all that like little triangle plaza where you have two roads converging,
Right.
they kind of like shoehorned it in there. It would all be on property that's under DOT's jurisdiction. So
But
then it
that
would be
would be
theirs.
like those porta potties. What about
That's
just,
right.
right? Yeah, what about, I guess maybe they're asking for porta potties. How about just bathrooms? That maybe even bathrooms that exist already that are that open.
Well, yeah, I think the bathrooms that they have in mind for this request are the ones that the city actually already owns. They're sitting for the last 10 years. They've been sitting in a warehouse in Queens.
Got
They're
it.
the ones that you put the quarter in, and then after 15 minutes, it self washes the interior. There's one in Madison Square Park.
You better get out before the.
Yeah, no, I think I saw somebody come out dripping wet one time.
dear
It
God.
could have been somebody who wanted to shower. I don't know.
Maybe, but no, that's horrible.
Yeah. But yeah, but these are the sorts of things that people can add on. But what's going to happen is they're going to look at this old list. They're going to decide what sorts of things to drop off the list, either because they're funded or it's no longer a priority, or because for whatever other reason the committee decides. So some things will be dropped off this list. Some things may be added from this list, but ultimately the vote will the final list will be in a resolution that goes to full board, and then there's a hearing on that full board in October, and the hearing usually opens and then closes and no one says anything, and then I'll sit for a couple hours and plug this data this information into city planning's web portal. It's horrible. And then they'll generate our next statement of district needs. So just to give you guys a sample, this is what it will look like. And it's part of our community profile. So it has all this information, about
That should have
burden.
affordable housing, doesn't it? It doesn't.
There's some stuff about affordable housing here a little bit. I mean, they talk about rent burden. I don't know if they talk about the generation of affordable housing, but you can see what you can read all about this. Just go to budget.mcb1.nyc and you'll see everything that we put in last time. And if you want this changed, then either we talk about it next month, and Pat will bring that to executive committee, or you can bring it to executive committee. The more discussion we have about this in committee, the easier it's going to be to work it out in executive. What was happened in years past is that it all waits for executive committee, and then there's just so much to do that the committee's like, just whatever. They do make a couple of changes and move on, and kind of all the work that in potential is not captured. So I'm really pushing to have this be part of our process earlier and earlier every year to see if we can get it to catch on. But I'm here as a resource if you need me. But yep, this is the process, and then city planning seeds all this stuff out to the agencies. The agencies respond, they comment on it. Our council member can review this. Many times agencies will say, hey, we've looked at your statement of district needs. In fact, for the RFP for World Trade Center Site 5, they put a link to our statement of district needs in the RFP saying, identify a community need from this document. So it's a resource that others do rely on. So getting it right creates kind of the snapshot that others will use when deciding what the community wants and how their project, how it relates to those needs or wants.
Lisa, will this new document have updated census information?
Yeah, because the city planning's demographic units have already processed everything. So they'll definitely have all the new census stuff in there. When they do the numbers.
The 2020 stuff has been processed?
Yeah, yeah. City planning's.
So will you send us the link for this, like tomorrow's Friday, right? Tomorrow or Monday? And then we can come back to this again. We can put aside half an hour for October's meeting. Hopefully everyone will have had a chance to kind of look at it, peruse it a little bit. And if there are some needs that you've identified, we can discuss and add it to our list. Yes?
Mm-hmm.
Sound like a plan? Okay. Anything
Thanks,
else
everyone.
on that topic, Lucian? And then just a little bit about, sorry, I did not bring my sheet with me about the inclusion and equity. Just a little, clue us in a little bit about what we're supposed to be discussing there.
Yeah, so every committee is generating a number of questions that we'll ask ourselves when we're putting together a resolution to make sure that the resolution respects the foundational aspects of equity and inclusion, to make sure that we're guiding ourselves, the guiding principles. But we have to evaluate the resolutions that we make to make sure that we're not leaving out sensitive groups, that we're not leaving out, we're not making assumptions about who's able to participate in any kind of thing. So it's every committee has a different potential of how to make impacts to equity and inclusion. Like land use, certainly every project should be analyzed through a lens of equity and inclusion. Transportation certainly must be analyzed through the same sort of lens. But quality of life, in terms of your multiple hats that you all wear, whether it's diffusing construction, reconstruction issues, whether it's affordable housing needs, there are certainly guiding principles that we should be able to ask ourselves and go through a list and say, are we being complete in our own analysis? So those questions are, as an internal resource, is what should be discussed, and we just need to start formulating those.
And I'd like to thank Mariama and Justine for having brought this up a long time ago. So I think we should probably start a list of what we think we should ask ourselves when we are discussing and voting on resos that we've written. And I don't know how we go about doing that, but it's a conversation that we as a committee can have and possibly come up with, questions that we should be looking at whenever we're discussing something.
It's
So
such a
anyway,
great idea. I'm just wondering, is there a list, Lucian, that kind of circulating through community boards that could be a good bouncing off point for us to get into our specific, discussion?
I think a really great example to just get started is transportation had a pretty good conversation about this.
So Betty can help us.
Yeah, Betty has a list that I think more effectively, if I'm going to get the link to YouTube so you can watch that part of the meeting and how the discussion went, because I think that'll do a really good job of letting you all see kind of how the conversation took place and the ins and outs of it. So just let me find that YouTube.
While you're looking for that, can I just offer something to think about too?
Please,
A lot of things that we want to do, or that we do actually do, in the name of, progress, moving forward, and it seems really good, is sometimes harmful to some of these groups that we claim to be wanting to protect. So for example, since we're on the subject of affordable housing today, there's this, not in our district, but nearby district, there's a lot of talking about proposed upzoning that would really affect Chinatown, right? So it would displace people from there. It would knock down some of the buildings that are existing in the name of affordable housing. So you say, oh, we're going to build affordable housing, and people that are, progressive, oh, that sounds great, let's build affordable housing, but not necessarily taking into consideration that in a case like this one, there's going to be a lot of housing, affordable housing that's existing, lost, people, removed from their homes and stuff like that. So
The communities.
just to be conscious of the fact that when we think we're doing good things, and the how do you say, the road to is paved with good intentions, right?
Unintended consequences.
Right. We have to try, myself include, everybody, to maybe just take it a step further. Once you have an idea that you think is good, then take it a step further and maybe look at it from another perspective and challenge. I actually submitted something this week to the broadsheet because I'm very upset about the bridge. And I know that people, want to ride bikes, and I think that's great. But I think that if they had to build it on a lane, they should have built it in the opposite direction. Build it in the Brooklyn-bound traffic, because people coming to Manhattan are trying to come to work. You didn't think about the poor people that need to get here from the outer boroughs. Why can't we all have something that works for us, so we can ride bikes and drive cars and get to work and not be fired?
Also,
so that's just putting it out there, like thinking of other angles once you come up with an idea.
I've seen at least 3 accidents also since that lane has been taken away.
Oh yeah,
Because I come,
horrible.
from Queens a lot, coming from my mother's house, coming home late at night, and I have seen at least 3 accidents when it all funnels down to
There's
like
no room
Park
to
Road
get out of
South
anybody's
Curve.
way. There's
Right.
no room to
Right.
pull over. God forbid you break down. I mean, you're just going to stop in front of somebody else, and it's going to be like you said,
So silly. The proposal that they
domino
put
effect.
forth, where they were going to have a separate level for the bikes, was so beautiful. I don't know why they had to rush it through.
And when you're driving on the bridge, if you look up, I mean, it looks like there's a structure there, as in, for it already. All they needed to do was like pave it. But
I don't know if it goes all the way.
I don't know. But if it wasn't, that would be my first preference. But if it wasn't possible, then put it in the Brooklyn-bound traffic. People leaving Manhattan maybe can afford to wait. People trying to get to Manhattan are usually going to work.
Are usually going to work. Yeah. It's crazy. But that's an
I'm
interesting
sorry,
prospect.
but I agree with you guys. But it's 20 after 8. Lucian, did you find what it was that you wanted to, the link you wanted us
Yeah,
to?
I put a link in the chat for the YouTube.
Okay. I am being extremely an old person. So what do I do with this link? I hit it.
I'll send you the link.
Thank you. Don't laugh, everybody.
No, put me on that email list too.
Everyone always says they're gonna put stuff in the chat, and then I'm like, well, what do you do with it?
Then you have to cut and paste it or click it and then save it. But I'll look.
What I've tried to do a screenshot, and then I later, and then I can't.
That's bad.
I can't do it. So.
Me too.
Okay, we're ending on a good laugh. So, is there anything else that anyone wants to bring up before we go our separate ways for the evening? As always, again, I want to thank Mariama and Lucian for starting the meeting.
Very welcome. Thank you too for doing it.
Yeah, thank you all.
Well, this was really Lucian's idea to do this.
Pat,
and then
I'm going to look forward to the discussion on the structure of October and the different discussions that you all are looking to have. So that way we can try to find a way to schedule all this.
So everybody, please, those who volunteer to reach out to these different organizations, please, reach out, see how far you can get with kind of getting somebody to come and talk to us. And like I said, we'll try to get it on the calendar. Everybody, please try to make it to next week's executive committee meeting so that you can, now you're prepared with information. You can ask, you were prepared before, but this just gave you more information.
I think
And
it might be easier to do the ask if we have an actual date. Right?
I don't know how
Right.
we're going to do that, though. I think we need to identify the person who will come and then try and I'm not sure, Rose. I don't know how
I
to
would
do
say
it.
it's a bit of a chicken and the egg thing, but the way that
Yeah.
we get around it is let's just throw a couple people at me,
Mhm.
and then I'll
Okay.
I'll have some dates and some people, and I'll see who lines up.
That
Right.
makes sense. Yeah, because you could do that and just say, okay, want to do something in October, and who's, these are the people who might be interested in talking, who's available, and then you can pull it off.
Right.
And Lucian, if I can help in terms of writing any emails or anything like that, please tap me because I'm happy to do that.
I
And
appreciate
everyone,
you. I thank you for that
um,
offer.
I think Karen was on the line. I don't know if she's still with us. Thank you for attending. She is one of our valued members who is a specialist in housing.
Yes.
And
Wow.
through Susan Cole called me this morning. She was invited but couldn't attend because she's going to her son's wedding. And but she is going to, she said she is available to help in any way she can with this affordable housing discussion. So when she gets back, maybe she can attend that meeting that you're trying to organize right now. Okay. And then Mariama, and if you want to, you said there is going to be, your coalition has having a meeting with someone from Pratt. If you
Yeah,
want to
our
send
meeting's
out
the
that
28th
information.
via Zoom.
Okay, so if you want to send that information to the committee so that they can
Will
attend,
do. Thank you.
that would be great. All right, everybody. Again, thank you. Good meeting. Have a lovely evening. Oh, Betty, we're going to reach out to you also, right, for the conversation, for the list. We're going to look at the YouTube, and then we would like to have a discussion.
Yeah, that
with
would
you
be
about
good
what
to
you
do that.
Yeah, and
Because
transportation.
I could use some guidance. I don't know
Right.
where to go, how to do it.
Right. All right.
Awesome.
So everybody,
Thank you.
thank you.
Thank
Have a
you.
good night. Stay
Right.
safe,
Bye.
and
Good night.
Everybody.
see you next week.
Everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.